Good Wednesday to you. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway on the Salem News Channel, Salem Radio Network, all of our great radio affiliates. Welcome aboard. We're top to bottom with guests today, most talking about Iran. But I'm starting off with Mary Catherine Ham, co-host of Getting Hammered. And there was a super duper normal Getting Hammered today with Kelly Mayer as our guest host, as opposed to Vic Mattis. I found it very amusing, Mary Catherine. I don't know Kelly. What's the deal on Kelly?
Kelly is a political operative out in Colorado, so she works in the big square states on formerly on getting Republicans elected, but the party out there not doing so great these days, and that's one of the things that she comments on and observes and tries to correct to the best of her ability by getting normal people into the party. Because once a party goes into a spiral in a state, it is hard to get back. So that's what's going on out there.
But is she super duper not normal? Like your kids thought of you?
No,
you
she's
have to explain
she's
super
like
duper not normal.
I mean, we all have our ways. All my gal friends, I would say, are a little too into politics to be actually normal, but but she is a normie mom out there.
Okay, it's not normal to get a week off and say, I know, I'm going to go to auctioneer school. And I've never heard of auctioneer school. When I would get a week off, I would go to like St. John's College and read great books with a bunch of venture capitalists, that sort of thing. But the auctioneer school in Iowa in a blizzard, that's just not normal.
Hey, you know what? We're just opening up new areas of capitalism to understand, and it's very powerful.
I have one more question before we get to the serious stuff. You have a Star Spangled Banner rendition. You can sing the Star Spangled Banner?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's a treat, but I can hit the notes. I can carry a tune, yes.
Okay, I
mostly wield it as a weapon because if there's a rowdy crowd, I just start the anthem and then they hush and then I say, lucky you, here's the real singer.
I have a request, which is when Vic is in the house, that you get whatever kind of boombox you need and you warm up the pipes and you let us hear it. Okay. Because you never know when you're going to use it. We were in the middle of Yosemite, somewhere way off in the middle of nowhere. Actually, it was in the Canadian Rockies. And all of a sudden, the fetching Mrs. Hewitt thought, there might be bears around here. And she broke into the Star Spangled Banner. So bears.
Look, you don't want to surprise them, and they're very patriotic. So all works out when you use that as a tool.
All right, let me come around to patriotism. Your assessment of our war with Iran.
Look, to me, the media seems to be almost not at all focusing on what look like tactical and operational, pretty tremendous victories, along with alliances and open support from Arab states that you would not have suspected, Gulf states that you would not have predicted several years ago. And so I don't want to miss that part of the story for the fact that everyone is reporting only on there are risks here. Of course there are risks here. There are risks in any military action. But it seems to me that there's a lot of overlooking of the actual victories happening.
Now, we're Americans. We don't like to hurt people. We really don't. But the way to win a war is to blow up the bridges and the roads, destroy the power plants, and decimate the refineries so they can't make any money afterwards. And I'll bet the people of Iran, the families of the 30,000 plus people who were murdered, would not mind if we told them what we were going to do and they could stay away from it. What do you think?
Yeah, look, I think that the people of Iran have shown to the best that they can. Obviously, they're sort of cut off from things that they are supportive of much of this in the clips that we have seen. But I'm not sure exactly what that looks like moving forward.
Well, I'm afraid we won't take a kill shot because the president doesn't want to blow up the infrastructure that allows Iran to rebuild. We do dominate this. You wouldn't know it from the media. But we have complete air supremacy. We can hit anything we want to hit anytime we want. We can hit it 3 times. And between the Israelis, and we've hit 16,000 targets. But the IRGC keeps bringing people out of retirement, and they're old killers. They're ruthless SOBs. They're not going to be reformers.
Well, yeah, and I think it's an open question what the American public will tolerate when it comes to length of a military action or how much you can employ a kill shot. Because our sort of military supremacy in the actual operational part is not really in question at this point, certainly coupled with Israeli intel, which is amazing, and those two working together. But I do think there's a question about how much the public is willing to stomach, and sometimes that threshold can be quite low. So I think, and of course, Trump is attuned to that to some degree.
Now, what did you pay for gas last, Mary Catherine?
I'm not sure I could tell you, but I'm in Northern Virginia, so it's expensive.
Okay, my son is visiting California. Paid $6.50 a gallon of gas on his way to Disneyland today, and that's not
I,
unusual. We've been there before in California under Joe Biden, but it's not what we've been used to for a while. I don't think the American people will break and run on Trump if he brings the regime down. This is a world historical moment. It's a pivot moment. This regime has been nothing but evil for my adult life. Do you think we've got 3 months of hardship in us?
I think some people are interested in the world shifting moment that this is. I think he needs to make a case for it regularly. I think an Oval Office address on this and why it's important would be helpful because people are concerned about the gas prices. They are concerned about their home lives and how things look there for what they can afford. And if it looks like he is too distracted by this and not making that case, it does run a risk of alienating people before the midterms.
Now,
And
I've
then he
got
may calculate
August.
that that's worth it.
Okay. I've got August Pfluger coming up. He runs the Republican Study Committee. And I'm going to make my plea to him. Please do a reconciliation. Please put your arm around the Pentagon supplemental. Double it. If they ask for $200 billion, give them $400 billion. Tell them to spend it on Golden Dome. Fund DHS through the end of the term so that we don't go through this ridiculous stuff at the airports anymore. And hang any other Christmas tree ornament. But do it in 2 weeks. It's not really complicated, Mary Catherine. You can do it with 51 votes in the Senate, and you can do it with a majority. You can lose Massey, who won't vote for it. But what do you think? Should they at least try?
Look, I do think it's probably important in the near term to do something domestically to say that you're doing something and say, look, these are our priorities. We're making sure that these people can't mess with you in the future by pulling funding, by doing these shutdown stunts. I think they could have been better over the last bit about messaging that this is wholly a project of the Democrats that are proactively attempting to do this. The media is not going to back you up on that. You got to make that clear yourself from the beginning so that people standing in these TSA lines know why. But yeah, proffering an actual solution to that through legislation would probably be a good pitch for people.
Okay, last question about Northern Virginia. They shut the schools down in anticipation of thunderstorms that did not come. Now, in Warren, Ohio, thunderstorms meant Tuesday. What is wrong with this state?
Many things, but what's wrong with a lot of blue localities, particularly when the politicians are aligned with teachers' unions, is that they practiced closing schools for several years. They got really good at it. And the places that practiced closing schools continue to do it at the drop of a hat. And places that practice being open are better for students and will do it even through adversity. Pittsburgh, by the way, closing for the NFL draft for 3 days while that happens.
No,
I mean,
they're
that's
not.
even Detroit didn't do that. And they had 775,000 people in town for the draft. But this is what leadership in education does now in blue areas.
Wow. I didn't know that. I'm going to get Selena Zito on the case. Mary Catherine M., always good to see you. Follow her at MK Hammer. Listen to her at Getting Hammered along the podcast. Very funny podcast today. Very funny podcast. Well done, Mary Catherine. I'll scold Vic for missing it. But remember, I would like to hear your national anthem sometime. Mary Catherine, by the way, is your Speakers Bureau Washington Speakers Bureau? Oh, she's gone. Okay, let me tell you about andrewandtodd.com, one of my great sponsors. andrewandtodd.com, 888-888-1172. 888-888-1172. They will help you get the loan to buy your house. They will help you refinance your house. If you're a veteran or you have an FHA mortgage, they can do the rapid refinance, like 30 days, get a refinance. It's a math question whether you want to refinance. You might have a 4% loan. Oh, I don't want to give that up. It's a math question. How much are you paying on your student loan? How much are you paying on your car loan? How much have you got on your credit card? It's a math question. But if you have to buy a house in this market, you don't only want to be pre-qualified, you want a letter from the lender, in this case, Union Home Mortgage, that's who AndrewandTodd.com are with, that says you are approved. You can buy this house for this much down and this much of a loan. You can get that from AndrewandTodd.com. You can also get a reverse mortgage if you're a senior, 62 years and older and living in your primary residence. But you got to call 888-888-1172 or call them at andrewandtodd.com. They've served thousands of my listeners over a score of years. andrewandtodd.com. Noah C. Rothman, senior writer for National Review. Iran war hawk. I'm just going to now use that as your lower third, Noah, because you're like me. You're an Iran war hawk. Do you think Donald Trump has it in him to finish the job?
I sure hope he does. I mean, that is the biggest question mark, isn't it? I kind of think that what we've been seeing over the course of this week could be any number of things. It could be everybody has been saying, well, maybe he's just trying to manipulate oil markets, or maybe he's just trying to look for a diplomatic off-ramp, or perhaps he's sowing dissension within the ranks in the IRGC and the clerisy. Everybody thinks that their brothers in arms are going to sell them out, right? Could be all of those things. It could be none of those things. We don't know. But what we're seeing in the press seems to be an exploration of every possible downside of this war, except the prospect of stopping too soon. That's the most dangerous of all the outcomes that are presented before us right now. And it seems to me that the press exploring all these outcomes leaves that one unexplored because it's the one they want.
Yeah, I think you're right. Now, I want to make it clear, because I'll say this if the war ends during this broadcast. We are much better off today than we were 25 days ago, because the face of the regime is revealed. Most of the regime has been shattered, and their military war-making ability has been set back decades. But they would think that they had won. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have a 2,700 word piece on this on the website if you're interested in my thoughts in all of their logarithmic, and the extent to which I can't contain them. But beyond the fact that we have defanged, for the most part, Iran's capacity to project power across its borders, we have also reordered the geopolitical landscape in ways that are very beneficial to us. China and Russia have been exposed as fair weather friends. The strategic pact that they signed with Iran as recently as January isn't worth the ink that was spilled on it. Their radars and anti-air systems have been exposed as insufficient to meet the threat posed by Western air power. And the Gulf states seem rather completely arrayed against Iran, recognizing that Iran is the threat in their neighborhood, not Israel, not the United States. And the United States is the only power on Earth that has both the will and the capability to see to their defenses. They're going to gravitate closer to American orbit as a result.
Ambassador Youssef Al-Otaiba, who is really one of the more influential and important ambassadors in Washington, D.C., he's been here for a long time, ambassador from the United Arab Emirates to the United States, has a piece in the Journal. The UAE stands up to Iran. This war requires a conclusive outcome, one that addresses Tehran's full range of threats. I think that's an appeal for the kill shot. And by that I mean blow up the highways, blow up the bridges, blow up the power plants, blow up the oil refineries, reduce the country to penury. The people will take it from there. Do you agree with me?
Well, I don't know. The president doesn't share that outlook, as you said in the last segment. He wants to leave as much infrastructure in place for a successor regime to utilize, and so the Iranian people can get a post-Islamic Republic Iran off its feet as soon as possible. I'm not going to second guess that scenario. It's too soon to think about post-war scenarios in the midst of the conflict. But people accuse me of being Pollyannish about this war merely because I don't emphasize the negatives, or the theoretical negatives, honestly, the possible downsides, of which there are many, and I'm willing to recognize and explore. But what they don't explore is the degree to which the tactics, which are begetting the strategic benefits that we're enjoying now and will enjoy as a result of this war, are immensely successful. People brush them off as saying, yada, yada, yada. We never win the post-war. But you get to the post-war by the tactics. If you don't focus on the beat by beat and you talk about the day after, the audience has no idea, honestly, what you're talking about and is primed for pessimism. And that seems to me to be, honestly, sort of the ticket into sophisticated circles now. If you're not really hopeless and dour and melancholy about this war, well, you're just not a serious person. Or you're not appraising yourself of the news.
No, it's weird. I agree. But I am not. I think we are crushing them. And I
And
think the
we're
American
following this at a
military,
granular level.
yeah, and the only thing that has bothered me happened yesterday. The IRGC is now bringing people out of the freezer. They're bringing out the 68 to 70-year-old generals who fought way back 80 to 88 against Saddam. They're hardened killers. They've got money in the bank, and their 401ks are at risk, and they're going to kill everyone they need to kill on the street. So they're not going to a regime of moderates. They're bringing the old hardliners out of retirement to replace the ones we've killed. That tells me that we're gonna be in the war for a while. Isn't that what you?
I lost your audio.
I got you. Go ahead, Noah. Can you talk? No, it can't hear us. It must have froze. That's too bad. Yeah. Well, I will say again. In fact, I'll go to Dwayne's cut sheet in the meantime. Can you play for me?
I'm back.
Oh, you're back. All right.
Sorry about
I can
that.
hear you. That's okay. My point was yesterday they brought the old guard out of retirement.
Yeah.
The IRGC guys who were killers for years. That's a bad sign. They're not going to make peace with Donald Trump. Do you agree?
No, they're not going to make peace. Just about the entire the regime, the IRGC and the clerisy, which are one and the same, are highly ideological, highly committed to the revolutionary creed inside Iran. And the old timers are going to be even more inclined towards that outlook. But the post-war environment that we want to create is one of internal fragmentation within the regime. Expose elite disagreement over how the best course of internal survival is, individual survival. Those disagreements will have to materialize after the war, and they involve the disintegration of patronage networks, institutions that break down, the isolation that Iran experiences on the world stage beginning to bite, as well, including not just the Western world, but the anti-American axis, Russia, Beijing, Moscow, Beijing, North Korea, etc. And those old timers are going to be the people who expose those internal divisions. They can't be in hiding. They have to be visible, because those are the people who have to break at some point, either with the regime or with the people, and they have to compel a confrontation at some point with the internal mechanisms of this regime versus a conflict with the people in the streets. And we can anticipate that another conflict with the Iranian people will materialize, as it has pretty regularly over the course of this century: 2001, 2009, 2017, 2019, 2022, and 2025. We're going to see another one soon. And we need to see the Iranian regime exposed so that its internal divisions can be visible by the public and by the wider world. So I'm not entirely horrified by the prospect. In the near term, it will be horrible for the American people, difficult for us. But in the long term,
last question: who besides Noah Rothman and Hugh Hewitt are Iran war hawks?
Well, it really does depend on who you ask, and I think the American people would be supportive of this project, as Mary Catherine said in the last segment. The president needs to enlist the American people in this national project. Sacrifices will be asked of them. They already are. And the president needs to be forthright about that. But within the Republican Party, the majority of them are supportive of this war, apprehensive about its outcomes, anxious about its conduct, but supportive of the war aims and its conduct so far. And that's a bedrock that the president can build on. He should get to work on it, because that apprehension is only growing, and the American public want to know that their investment in this project is going to yield returns.
Not only yield return, but that it's a world historical moment of the likes of which we have not seen since 1989. Rare when you realize that you're in the middle of a pivot. Everybody should know this is that right now. It's like 1989, and we have to topple this regime. We just have to. Noah C. Rothman, thank you. Joined by Sarah C. Bedford of the Washington Examiner. Follow her on X at Sarah C. Bedford. Sarah, do the Democrats know that they are losing the country over the TSA imbroglio?
No, actually, it seems like they don't at all. In fact, it seems like they're taking the opposite lesson from this. Republicans have accused them, I think, quite credibly, of moving the goalposts on what a DHS funding deal could look like. They don't seem to be acting in this situation as if they believe they're going to shoulder any political blame for the long lines we're seeing at airports and the other knock-on effects of the DHS shutdown.
If that's the case, why is there an effort to basically do a Caesar on the way to the forum to Chuck Schumer? Because Chris Murphy and the other people have lean and hungry looks in their eyes.
Well, it's a problem for Schumer because every time that he has ultimately accepted some sort of deal that leads to the reopening of government. Now, this is a partial government shutdown, but twice now we've seen Schumer do that with full government shutdowns. He's faced an enormous amount of backlash from the Democratic base. There's already talk of challenges to his leadership. Should Democrats expand their minority, or even, in a less likely scenario, take control of the Senate? There's talk that maybe Schumer isn't the man for the moment for Democrats. So he's worried about his leadership position as well. And again, you do have Democrats acting as if they don't think that they are going to pay a political price for this shutdown. And so there's not a ton of incentive or pressure on Schumer right now to accept what might be considered by the base a bad deal.
All right, let me go over to the others. I have criticisms of the GOP as well. Congressman Pfluger is coming along later. He runs the Republican Study Committee, and I'm going to press him on reconciliation. Is it going anywhere? Because the GOP is not going to get anything done unless they do it on reconciliation.
It's going to be an enormous challenge. You can only lose 3 senators if you're going to do that, and obviously the margins for Johnson maybe even smaller at this point. So it's really, really hard to get all of the Republicans on board. But you're right, reconciliation will be the only train leaving the station this year, realistically, for a lot of priorities. And there are a bunch of things that Republicans want to get done. They want some extra Pentagon funding for the Iran war. There's some talk of potentially trying to shoehorn parts of the SAVE Act, election integrity measures, into a reconciliation bill. And you could also put funding for ICE removal and enforcement operations in a separate bucket and fund it through reconciliation, and not have to hash out all of this immigration enforcement stuff with the DHS deal. So there are a lot of reasons for Republicans to do a reconciliation bill, but because it's a heavy lift, that's why you've seen reluctance so far this year from Republicans.
They could, I believe, fund DHS through the end of the Trump term, so we don't have to worry about that again. They could take the Pentagon's floated $200 billion. They could double it and add money for Golden Dome and the Golden Fleet. And they can, a lot of this stuff from SAFE won't make it past the Senate parliamentarian into a bird bath, but they're not going to get it through the talking filibuster either. They might as well take a run at it. And I just don't understand doing nothing. Does anyone tell you why they're doing nothing?
I think there's fear for some of the vulnerable members. I mean, you have Susan Collins of Maine, for example, has said she doesn't love the idea of doing reconciliation. She's going to be in a very bitter reelection battle this year. So you do have some Republicans on the bubble who are nervous about voting for stuff that might come back to haunt them. And you're right about parts of the SAVE Act not making it through the bird bath. There's talk of potentially measures that might incentivize states to pass their own voter ID laws, but that certainly will not satisfy conservatives who say this is an 80-20 issue. It's so popular, even most Democrats support it. Why can't a Republican trifecta in Washington deliver this for us? And that's a valid criticism from conservatives.
Well, it's not a valid concern. It's not, in my eyes, a valid criticism, because the filibuster is the filibuster is the filibuster. And if we change it, it's gone forever. And I guess Republicans just have to be willing to stand up and say that. And Mike Lee will get mad, but Mike is a good guy. The Republicans who understand this do not want to end the filibuster. Has anyone made the argument yet?
No, I think you're right that there's not an appetite to end the filibuster, but there could be a way that Republicans could break out the most popular parts of the SAVE Act, and I'm talking primarily about voter ID, and strip out the things like the proof of citizenship to register to vote and the stuff that Democrats have really voiced more aggressive objections over. It would be hard for Democrats to oppose a voter ID only bill. And in fact, Schumer has sort of hinted that, look, we're not opposed to voter ID. We know 80% of America wants it. It's all that other stuff. So Republicans could sort of strategize and not let perfect be the enemy of the good if they really wanted voter ID.
Well, I hope they do that. I didn't realize Schumer said they should get what they can. The good must not be, the perfect must not be the enemy of the good. Sarah C. Bedford on X from the Washington Examiner. Good to talk to you. Thank you, Sarah. Danny Pletka, Senior Fellow at American Enterprise Institute, co-host with Mark Thiessen of What the Hell is Going On podcast. I saw Mark out for dinner in Virginia, Danny, and I thought, Danny's probably working. Mark's out here having drinks. That's not really fair, Danny. You ought to tell him he needs to be working more. I'm so glad you're here because I want to ask you this. Do you think the Trump administration has it in them to finish the job? And by that I mean bite down. It might mean high energy prices for 3 months. It might take 3 months to clear the Strait of Hormuz, but bring this regime down. Do you think they've got it?
So that's a great question. I think that the problem is the end of the sentence. Does the Trump administration have what it takes to fill in the blank? If it's to open the Straits of Hormuz, I think there's no question. They have what it takes. They have a plan. I think that they are executing on that plan. I think the president hasn't faltered. I think he recognizes that he cannot allow the Iranians to, at will, close the strait. But if the question is, does he have the will to see our campaign from the air topple the regime? I think the answer to that increasingly is no.
Why do you think that? Because I'm betting, unless they hit his 15 points, which is effectively the dismantling of the regime in the way that the South Africans gave up their nukes and the Libyans gave up their nukes, they're not the regime anymore. They're not Khomeiniist. They're corrupt dictators at that point. Why do you think Trump will blink if they don't deal?
I don't think it's a question of blinking, Hugh. I think it's a question of defining his end game. And increasingly, what I hear in Washington, and frankly from the Israelis as well, although I'm hearing a lot, is that their aim is to create the circumstances under which the Iranian people can reclaim their country. It is not to bomb the regime into smithereens so there's nothing left. And I will say this, if you and I think about this, and you have a lot of experience, going back decades as well, if you think about this, there are very few campaigns from the air that execute a regime change. So, I think those are the big caveats right now. And that's very much what I'm hearing. And that is what my co-host Mark Thiessen is hearing as well.
So, what do you think happens if we will stipulate the Iranian people want to be rid of this regime and they would fight for it if they had weapons? What happens if Iran runs out of electricity and oil? I mean, if we really do shatter their infrastructure like the president threatened to do and then walked it back, is that good for the Iranian people or bad? It's bad. It would make rebuilding harder, but in the short term, doesn't it make it easier to throw off the regime?
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Look, on the one hand, you want to preserve as much as is possible in order for a successor regime to take over. On the other hand, you need to recognize there are 47 years here. And as you and I have discussed previously, this isn't a strongman government. This is a system. This is a dictatorship. The Islamic Republic is a giant infrastructure and it needs to be crushed. And unfortunately, there will be some baby thrown out with the bathwater here.
Well, what worried me this week is that they began to get old timers off the bench. People who fought in the 80-88 war, IRGC retired general, they're killers. They're not, they're enjoying their lucre, they're enjoying their corruption, but they've been brought back to kill the next wave of that regime's not changing. Danny, do you think there's any chance of it changing?
Not a chance. No, absolutely not. Look, they are inextricably tied to it. And I would add, there's so much money at stake, even if you discount the ideology. And I don't discount the ideology. These people believe that they are God's chosen leaders. They believe that they are the only people who can lead Iran. And even if you set that aside and you think that's a bunch of, think tank claptrap, they have so much money that they've stolen, and if they are going to hold on to that money, they need to hold on to power.
I don't know if you know Vali Nasser. He's over at Johns Hopkins, and he wrote the book Iran's Grand Strategy. When you read that or you listen to Be Ready, they're never going. It's a zombie regime, but it's pretty hard to kill a zombie. You agree with that assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I watch cable TV just like everybody else, and I know just how hard zombies are to kill. And one of Iran's most loving analysts here in Washington, somebody who really always takes the side of the regime, said to me a couple weeks ago, he said the regime says that 30% of the people are with them. Even if that's half true, we are talking about millions and millions of people. This is going to be a hard job. I think the Iranian people can do it. I think there's a tipping point. I think we can help push it. But I worry that both the Israelis and the Americans are overconfident in our ability to put the Iranians in a position from which they can't come back. They can always come back.
Are we too restrained? And by that I mean they do have power plants, they do have oil production facilities, they have command and control structures that will blanker the entire city and throw it into darkness. They have overpasses, they have roads and bridges. We did not spare that with the Allies in World War II. We didn't spare it with Vietnam, and I'm not sure we should be sparing it now. Should we?
No, you are completely right. And there are other mistakes we're making in terms of the assets we have. We should absolutely be hitting everything. We should be allowing the Israelis to hit what we're not hitting. And in addition, remember, only 50% of Iran is Persian. There are Azeris, there are Baluch, there are Kurds. Everyone hates this regime. This regime has murdered absolutely everybody. And if they're bad to the Persians, you can only imagine what they're like to other minorities. Those people want to stand up and revolt. Those people want to march on towns in the north, in the south, and we should be letting them. So far, the president has not been willing to let them, in part because Erdogan, the dictator in Turkey, does not want to see the Kurds get any liberty whatsoever, and so he's talking him out of it day on, day out, and that's wrong.
I did not know that, and that is why we talked to Danny Pletka. Follow her at Pletka at AEI and listen to what the hell is going on with Mark Thiessen. Danny, don't let him go out and drink when you're working. I'm telling you, I saw him out there at the bar having a good time. Danny was working. Thank you, Danny. I'd like all of you just to lean in a little bit right now and listen to my appeal that you make a contribution to Food for the Poor. It's my annual campaign for Food for the Poor. And thousands of you already stepped up. Thousands more have said, oh, I'm going to do that. And you forget. Remember the phone number, 855-359-4673. 855-359-4673. 855-359-4673. Or you can go to my website, hughhewitt.com. At the very top, there's a banner, Give Living Water. This money goes through Food for the Poor with very low overhead. They've been doing this for decades. Totally tax deductible. Christian organization. They work through local churches. They bring clean water and basic food to the most impoverished people in our hemisphere. And you can help them. You can help them today. Here's one of my favorite calls over the years during one of these campaigns.
I just wanted to say I really admire your work with Food for the Poor each year. And I'm 16 years old. I live at home, so I don't really make a whole lot of money. But I have an envelope that I keep on my nightstand, and each time I do get some money, I put a little bit away throughout the year, maybe like $1 or $2, and it's for Food for the Poor. And so this year I saved up $80 to give, and I'm not saying any of this to brag. I just wanted to encourage your listeners who probably make more money than I do, and so if you can just spare a little bit, that would be good. Bye.
I love listening to Sarah. Every year I play Sarah as we round the stretch into the last week of the campaign to get people to realize a 16-year-old is thinking about the lost and the least, and I hope you will as well. Again, there's a banner at the top of hughhewitt.com. $5, $50, $500, $5,000, $5 million. Bill Gates, are you listening? Stop inventing charities. Everybody, stop inventing charities. We know how to do this. Food for the Poor knows how to do this. It's a great investment of your charitable dollars. Thank you in advance. It's also time to take my relief factor. I'm taking 3 packets a day. One of those rare times. I usually take 1 packet a day. Relief factor usually works at 1 packet a day. But I have done something, I think, judging from Dr. Google, it's rotator cuff tendonitis, given what hurts. But I'm taking it every hour today. I carry in curcumin and veratron omega. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you see the 4 pills. And I'm down to my grapefruit seltzer. I hate grapefruit seltzer. But I got to take my relief factor to get this thing better. It's inflamed. It's tendonitis. It hurts. And I forget it. And I do something like this with the wrong arm. And then I go, I say bad things. Relief factor will fix it. If it doesn't, I will go to a PT. But I think relief factor will fix it. It usually works on tendonitis. I'm here to tell you, you ought to give it a try. $19.95 for the 3-week starter pack, relieffactor.com, but you can call 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF. Ask for the starter pack, $19.95, less than $1 a day. Or go to relieffactor.com. The starter pack is there as well at relieffactor.com. I'm joined by Abe Greenwald. Abe is the executive editor of Commentary Magazine. He's also a frequent contributor, almost daily contributor to the Commentary podcast. Abe, I found today's podcast to be very interesting, especially towards the end when you raised the possibility that maybe persuasion is no longer possible in America. You want to expand on that?
Yeah, sadly, I think that's true. And actually, I wrote a newsletter to that effect that was sent out just about half an hour ago. I think that Donald Trump should have laid out a lucid and convincing argument for going into Iran when he did, in the way he did. But I think he should have done it because that's the job description. Do I think it would have persuaded some vast number of Americans who are now doubting the war? No, I don't. And if, to whatever extent it would do so, I think, I apologize, my dog is growling. To whatever extent it would do so, it would, I think that would be very fleeting as the media's anti-war coverage, wall-to-war anti-war coverage, has just swallowed up what is really an ongoing string of remarkable successes in this war. So the effort to talk down this war, to discuss it as if it's some sort of travesty, is so overwhelming. I mean, I'm kind of reminded of the argument that people made about Israel post-October 7th, that, you know, if the Israelis just could explain better to people why they were doing what they were doing in response to October 7th, as if October 7th wasn't proof enough, taped and filmed for everyone to see, wasn't case enough for what the Israelis were doing. And so similarly, if you look back on a 47-year history of the Iranian regime, its provocations, its violence, its killing, its weapons development, its terror supporting, and so on, and you don't see the case for war right now, you're not going to see it.
You know, Abe, I am reminded of the movie Chariots of Fire. Did you ever see it?
Yes.
Okay. So the sprinter is the Jewish kid, 1920 Olympics, true story, and he asks a professional track coach, make me faster. He says, you can't put in what God left out. God has left out of a lot of Americans basic knowledge about the evil nature of the regime in Iran. I mean, I don't think they understand it, how it's the equal of the Chinese Communist Party, and they are the equal of Putin on his worst day. These are the 3 worst regimes in the world. North Korea would be in that rank, except they've done about as much damage as they can do short of precipitating a nuclear war. Do you think Americans understand how evil Iran is and its ambitions?
No, I think they're doubtful. I think they don't quite believe it. I think that's also because we suffer from still Vietnam syndrome, Iraq and Afghanistan syndrome, and then that's all complicated by Trump derangement syndrome. And on the left, you have these anti-colonialist ideologues who believe that any action the U.S. takes is prima facie a war crime. And on the right, a lot of what used to go under the banner of patriotism has been swallowed up by nationalism, which looks at American national interests from the most narrow lens and would say, well, even if they are an evil regime, what does that have to do with us?
All right.
So I think all told, yes, no.
Now, at 12:47 this afternoon, East Coast time, Ambassador Youssef Al Otaiba, who is the United Arab Emirates ambassador to the United States, and really one of the most talented people in the business inside of DC. I've had an opportunity to have dinner with him a few times. He works very hard at making his country understood to the Beltway press corps. He posted a piece over at the Wall Street Journal, which I recommend to every listener, and it reminds people the UAE, which is 40 miles away from Iran across the Strait of Hormuz, has absorbed 2,180 missiles, projectiles, drones. They're standing tall with us, and it finishes. The tagline is that this war requires a conclusive outcome, one that addresses Tehran's full range of threats. And the way that it ends, the last three paragraphs, Iran's nuclear capabilities have been degraded, its proxies have been weakened, more needs to be done to remove the missile and drone threats, and we are ready to join an international initiative to reopen the strait and keep it open. We aren't asking the U.S. to carry the full burden. We are defending our people, protecting regional stability and global prosperity, demonstrating that real alliances are built on cooperation and contribution, not dependency. Finally, we want Iran as a normal neighbor. It can be reclusive and even unwelcoming, but it can't attack its neighbors, blockade international waters, or export extremism. Building a fence around the problem and wishing it goes away isn't the answer. It would simply defer the next crisis. That is blunt as blunt can get. That puts UAE in with us and Israel. Don't you think it's time that Trump just resolves to finish the job?
Sure. And I'm not certain that he doesn't feel the same way. You know, he's very hard to read, to put it very mildly. And part of my thinking here, my suspicion, is that in his announcing these very positive talks, supposed talks with Iran, is in sense some way of him demonstrating for the world that he's going to get an unreasonable response from the Iranian regime that's going to reject diplomacy, and that he will then have made a stronger case for finishing the job afterward.
Now, finishing the job, in my view, I don't think we're going to send ground troops in any sort of numbers, maybe to secure the strait. I don't know. I'm a civilian. But I do think it means taking out their dual-use power plants, taking out their oil refineries, taking out their bridges and roads that allow command and control to function. In other words, treating it like an enemy in World War II, but with the precision that can save civilian lives. Would you support that?
Oh, sure, I would support that. I mean, I would probably go farther. I mean, I think we should retrieve fissile material. I think that would be a wise move. And I think then there's job finishing that goes beyond what America may be willing to put itself on the line for. In other words, I'd be perfectly fine if we left under the conditions that you describe. I'm very doubtful that there wouldn't be some ongoing operations having to do with Israel and the Mossad and their coordination with the Iranian people to actually overthrow the regime.
And I also believe if we did that, if we took out the infrastructure and we said we had to do it, the regime is irredeemable. By the way, they're getting old IRGC people off the bench. They're bringing in hardened killers who had, walked through minefields in the Iraq-Iran war. They're true believers. They're fanatics. If we just said, we had to do it, we're sorry, America, we spared as many lives, they will be bankrupt, they will be out of gas, they will have no friends. Isn't that the way to bring it down?
I think that's the road we're headed down, yeah. And I think that is exactly right, yeah.
And I think Republicans ought to just stand up and say, we support this, we want to pass the supplemental, we are the party of security and defense, and go into the November elections and let the Democrats be in favor of leaving this evil regime in place.
Sure. I mean, I have to admit, I think part of the calculation here on the administration's part is that maybe the midterms are a lost cause anyway. So let's do what's necessary, and then we'll let the chips fall where they may. If the war proceeds along the same lines that it's been going up till now, I think it's going to be the kind of situation where 6 months from now, polls will show a large chunk of Americans saying, "Oh, I was always for it."
I agree, but do you think President Trump understands this is the most important month of his presidency in history's terms? I think it is. We're not going to go to war with China if we can avoid it. I think this is the month. Do you agree with that?
100%. He's going all in on changing the world. I think he's very cognizant of that. And I think it's reflected in his demeanor, his behavior, the way he speaks. He is not rattled. He's unbelievably focused. I think he's, there's a lot of discomfort with Trump's being murky about messaging and being contradictory about messaging. And I have to say, I've grown quite comfortable with it because I think there's a good strategic reason for doing that, and he's using that well.
I heard you say that today, and I just said, I can't wait to talk to Abe today. You're exactly right. Abe Greenwald, follow him on X at Abe Greenwald. Sign up for his newsletter at commentary.org and listen to the podcast every day. You'll be smarter for it. Thank you, Abe. Early visit this week from Matt Continetti. Matt is the head of domestic policy studies at AEI. He's also a columnist for the Wall Street Journal. He has an excellent column in today's journal entitled, I got to get the title right, get to the right page here, Voters Lose in Congressional WrestleMania. And my favorite line in it is, Washington is too distracted by bitter infighting. It's too busy imitating professional wrestling to address voters' economic concerns. Matt, you're exactly right. Do you expect that's going to change anytime soon?
Unfortunately not, Hugh. I mean, we can just see what's happening on Capitol Hill, where there seemed like there could be a deal to open up the Department of Homeland Security and address the pay lapses for our TSA agents. But it seems like the Democrats are getting cold feet. Why? Because they're so fearful of their far left base, which despises ICE so much that the Democrats are willing to impose costs on an entirely different set of federal employees, the TSA agents, the Coast Guard, FEMA, all of whom are suffering because of this shutdown, while ICE, ironically, is fully funded for years thanks to the working families tax cut that was passed via reconciliation last year. So this type of empty gestural politics that we're witnessing on Capitol Hill doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon.
It's a pretty damning piece. I recommend everyone go and read it. But I also want to talk about the world historical event that's unfolding. This war has the possibility of taking off of the map the equal of any evil regime on the world's map and a thorn in the side of free people for 47 years. First question, do you think Americans realize how evil Iran is, the regime?
I do. I think that when you've looked at American public opinion prior to the launch of Operation Epic Fury, Americans have understood the Iranian regime for what it is. It's the world's largest sponsor of terrorism. It's killed Americans. It's held our people hostage. It's attacked our allies. It's oppressed its own people. Now, the public opinion currently is, I think, refracted through the lens of Donald Trump. And so when you see these polls saying that the public may be divided on what we're doing right now in Iran, I think you always have to read them with the view to, well, how does the public feel about Donald Trump? And we know that about half the country right now won't accept anything that Donald Trump does, even if he is addressing a long-standing threat to American national security, like he's doing with our Israeli allies in Iran right now.
Now, about 12:47 today, the Journal posted an editorial by Ambassador Yusuf Al-Otaiba from the United Arab Emirates of the United States, one of the true professionals in diplomacy inside the Beltway. In it, he basically, the subtitle says it all. This war requires a conclusive outcome, one that addresses Tehran's full range of threats. And I read part of it to Abe Greenwald in the last segment, and the bottom line is finish the job. Donald Trump. He doesn't say it explicitly, but that's the message. Do you think the president has it in him to finish the job?
Oh, I think he has it in him. I think that he's hearing messages like Ambassador Otaiba's from other partners, including the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, MBS, probably other Gulf states as well. We know that's the message he's hearing from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So President Trump wants to hold out the possibility of a diplomatic resolution. But when you actually look at what the Americans are asking of the Iranians, it's nothing that the Iranians will accept, because it's the same thing that we've been offering earlier. And when you look at what the Iranians are counter-offering the Americans, it's nothing America would accept. I mean, it's absurd. It would involve us recognizing Iran's sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. It would involve us paying Iran reparations for the attack. So I think while President Trump always holds out diplomacy as an option, he recognizes the need for force. And he also uses diplomacy sometimes as cover for putting our forces in place. So I think it's very interesting that the end of Trump's latest deadline for the Iranians to agree to the diplomatic proposal will coincide with the arrival of our Marines and some of our components of the 82nd Airborne into the region. So he may just be, like earlier, playing out the diplomatic channel while he's putting all of his forces in place for the next stage of the conflict.
So how would you react, Matt Continetti, given that we have precision strike? We can blow up every bridge, we can blow up every power plant, we can blow up every refinery, bankrupt the regime so it cannot pay its forces. They are not promoting moderates into these positions that are vacant because of assassination. They're pulling old IRGC people off the retirement rolls, off the bench, and they're killers. So they're not going to blink. They're not going to change. Shouldn't we reduce them to poverty before we throw ground troops in there and then wait and see what happens?
Well, Hugh, I think we need to reduce the regime to poverty. What I think that means is we need to take a real hard look at the sources of revenue to the regime. And that does mean there are energy flows. And so that does mean that not only do we need to get the Strait of Hormuz open, create a channel for commercial traffic free of Iranian threats, but we should also look at stopping the Iranian ghost fleet, stopping their refining capacity. I'd be reluctant to take measures that would affect the Iranian civilian population, because we're going to rely on that civilian population to be the boots on the ground in overthrowing the regime eventually. When I listen to the military experts like General Frank McKenzie or Admiral Mark Montgomery on your program, it seems to me that the military has a war plan in place, and one that they have been pursuing very effectively, and that probably has 2 to 3 more weeks left in it before all of our military objectives are complete. I trust General Kane, I trust Admiral Cooper, I trust our U.S. fighting men and women to pursue that plan. And I think at the end of it, we'll have a very good outcome, so long as we don't abandon the effort before all of our objectives are complete.
Well, I would follow through on their target list, but before we called it a day and sailed away with the strait open and their ability to blackmail us reduced, I would darken the place, because I think it would assist the Iranian people in freeing themselves if the agents of repression don't have the internet or energy. Last word to you, Matt.
I agree. And I think that just points to the fact that even when the bombs stop dropping, Hugh, America will still have a role to play. The people haven't taken to the streets yet, but when they do, they're going to need our support. That's why Trump sent help in the first place. So when they do go out on the streets, we need to be prepared to help them finally overthrow this regime.
Well said. By the way, if they do that, I believe that will make up a lot of ground in politics, but more importantly, from history's perspective, this is Donald Trump's big moment. Do you agree with that, Matt? It's his big moment?
It's his moment. Like he told the Atlantic, this is his time to run the country and the world, and he's changing the world in extraordinary ways. You know, it's so funny, Hugh, quickly, remember Xi Jinping said that the world was going to see things it hadn't seen in 100 years? Well, he was half right, except it's Donald Trump that's making those things happen.
Well said, Matt Continetti. Follow him on X at Continetti. Read his pieces in the Wall Street Journal and over at AEI. Thank you, Matt. I spend most of my time on the war, but once in a while I sneak in someone who does a little bit of policy, including Representative Andy Pfluger from Texas. He's the chairman of the Republican Study Committee. And August, excuse me, I always say Andy. I'm sorry, August. You gave a speech on X that I saw talking about the Democrats and the shutdown of DHS. Do you think that issue is going to last, Congressman, through to the fall?
Well, I mean, my Democrat colleagues on the Homeland Committee said, well, let me tell you why we got here. We got here because ICE agents were taking illegal aliens out of the country, and, you know, the narrative is just, they were very emotional about it. And I just had to refute that. I said, no, the reason we got here is because we're cleaning up a mess where 10 million illegal aliens have come into this country under Joe Biden's presidency, which was a complete disaster. And I said, not a single Democrat had any sympathy for Jocelyn Nungare's parents or for Laken Riley's parents, who were both tragically murdered by illegal aliens. That's the reason we're here. And now you're unwilling, even with an open border policy that was completely disastrous, you're unwilling to support TSA agents, Coast Guardsmen, Border Patrol, or ICE to just do their job to keep our country safe, even though we heard testimony today saying the terror threat on our American airlines is still high. So it's very shameful and it's tragic that we're in this situation. And yes, I do think that this issue is going to continue to be an issue that defines the Democrats of who they are.
I think it is. I think Republicans have taken back the party of defense and deterrence, and I think seriousness. How about a reconciliation bill, a second process that funds the Pentagon supplemental ×2, you know, give them whatever they want in ×2, and then funds DHS through the end of the Trump term so we don't have to deal with this insanity? I mean, there are Hezbollah sleeper cells. I was in the government a long time ago. I know there are a lot of bad guys. How about just using reconciliation to get the government working again?
Well, Hugh, as you know, I chair the Republican Study Committee, 190 members. We've been pushing for reconciliation for months now. And we are certainly open to a defense supplemental and DHS funding, but I think it needs to be more than that. You know, Democrats have obstructed passing anything. If President Trump cured cancer, they would vote against it. And that's the tragic nature of where we are. So we have to codify the rest of President Trump's agenda, and reconciliation is the mechanism by which we can do that. So yes, we can certainly include defense supplemental and DHS funding, but I don't think that can be the sole focus of this.
But when's it get started? What frustrates me, because I don't want to lose the midterms. I don't think it's an inevitability. I certainly don't think losing the Senate's an inevitability. But you got to do something. What are we waiting for?
Well, you're speaking my language. This is exactly what we have been pushing through the RSC. Let's go. We did such a good job through One Big Beautiful Bill of identifying so many of Joe Biden's errors and the things that he caused pain and suffering to every American family with. But there is more work to be done. You know, and our constituents want to know that we can unify. Even with a one-seat majority, we can and we will unify. And this is why we have been moving with the sense of urgency. RSC with 190 members has come together and said, we want to do this. I know the Speaker is in favor of it. Let's put the items on the board that we think we can accomplish that include housing affordability, healthcare affordability, energy affordability, but now probably also need to include national security and defense items.
So when does that decision get made, Congressman Pfluger? When does somebody say the starting gun goes off?
Well, I think the starting gun has gone off, and there are many of us who are working on this. And I know Chairman Jody Arrington is extremely motivated as the Budget Committee Chair to move this. So I think the starting gun has gone off, and we as a conference will be looking at a lot of the proposals and making those recommendations to Speaker Johnson ASAP.
Okay, so last question. How long does it take once the Budget Committee gets to work, gets a budget, gets it over to the Senate, and they agree to it, and then you got to go to the authorizing committees and the committees of jurisdiction? How long until we could see that get through? Because if that arrived in June or July, it could change the dynamic in the fall.
Well, certainly, and that's the goal. I think you just nailed it. Is this has to arrive no later than June, July timeframe. This is a 2-minute drill. You know, the One Big Beautiful Bill was really more of the long game, and we had some time on our side to get that done by the July 4th date that we set last year. But this is a 2-minute drill. It's more compact and narrow. The focus will be narrower. So, you just nailed it. I mean, we have to get this passed no later than July. And it will have an impact because those policies will come into play and American families will benefit from all of them. And our nation will be safer and more secure as a result of us continuing to work. We're not done, and we are going to continue to fight every single day.
Well, bravo on your floor remarks, and they weren't floor remarks. They were from behind a podium with other members, and I thought, well done, August Pfluger. Thank you so much, Congressman. Keep pushing the RSC, to keep pushing the leadership, to keep pushing reconciliation, because we need it. Josh Kraushaar, editor-in-chief of Jewish Insider. Josh, from your 30,000-foot perspective, how goes the war?
Well, look, it does seem like the Trump administration is trying to negotiate diplomatically with Iran and through back channels. Apparently, it doesn't seem like Iran is receptive. They, from the looks of this 15-point plan that was proposed, it looks like it's very similar to what was introduced to the Iranians before the war, and like was the case before the war, Iran has rejected it. So, I don't think. I think there is some domestic political pressure that Trump is facing, especially when it comes to higher gas prices. But when it comes to the military landscape, look, I think the U.S. and Israel are accomplishing things ahead of schedule and are actually achieving, as we've talked about on this show, a lot of their military objectives. The challenge, though, is number one, the Strait of Hormuz and figuring out how to deal with that and clear up the shipping, and that may take more military action to do so, more military assets, more personnel in the region. So that's a big wild card going forward. And I also think we're still seeing Israel being and the Gulf states as well facing ballistic missile attacks day in, day out. And the question is, how much more of the launchers and the missiles does Iran have, and how long is there the stockpile going to last for?
Now, Josh, about 3 hours ago, actually, hour and a half ago, Ambassador Youssef Al-Otaiba from the United Arab Emirates to the United States published over at the Wall Street Journal, a column, "The UAE stands up to Iran. This war requires a conclusive outcome, one that addresses Tehran's full range of threats." Points out the UAE has been on the receiving end of 2,180 missiles, drones, rockets, you name it, and they've had it. I think that is a sign that the Gulf allies are going to go over from being merely on the defensive but to the offensive, and that the end game's got to be the regime's got to go. What do you think?
Well, yeah, not just Youssef Al-Otaiba, who wrote that in the Wall Street Journal today, but we also saw the New York Times report, Hugh, yesterday, that the Saudis have urged Donald Trump and the administration to continue on, to continue to fight militarily, to get rid of the noxious regime in Iran. And I think they are much more concerned, frankly, that there could be some remnant left in place and would still pose a threat, an ongoing threat to the Gulf states, their economies and their way of life. And I think the Emirati ambassador to the U.S., I think in that column put it pretty well. He said, building a fence around the problem and wishing it goes away isn't the answer. It simply defers the next crisis. So if anything, you look at where the UAE and Saudi was before the war and where they are now, they're much more supportive of the military action. They're not eager for it to end right now. They want more accomplishments on the battlefield, and they really have actually said that they would like to see a different regime in Iran. And so that's a very notable comment from two of the closest Gulf state allies of the U.S.
Now, I expect the Houthis are going to get involved here pretty soon, and the Iranians sort of suggested that today, because the people that they're replacing the dead leadership with are veterans of the IRGC who had basically retired, but they're hard killers who are 70 years old, fought in the Iran-Iraq War, part of the Revolutionary Guard, the original Soleimani, Quds Force kind of hard-nosed guys. They're never going to change, Josh. Do you think that's the correct assessment? They don't know how to be normal.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the correct assessment, and candidly, like that's what a lot of the people who are a little more wary about the military operation had worried about, which is that you could get rid of some of the top leaders, as the U.S. Israel operation has done, but you still have layers and layers of IRGC and Basij and other, parts of the regime that have every incentive to fight till the death, because otherwise they'll they're every benefit they've had since the 1979 revolution is going to go away. So this is you've seen mixed reporting on this, but I think the initial notion that you could easily with airstrikes degrade and get rid of the regime is proving to be a little too optimistic, and it's probably going to take more not only longer military action, but perhaps boots on the ground if they do want to achieve those ends, which I'm not sure if the U.S. really wants to go that far. But that is
boots on the ground. But before we go to boots on the ground, though, we can destroy their oil production. The UAE can seize their money. So can Bahrain. The port facilities can be destroyed. And indeed, the power plant in Tehran, bridges can be blown up. All sorts of stuff can be done that doesn't involve boots on the ground. It hurts the Iranian population short term, but the regime can't. It's a zombie regime already. Take away their oil and they got nothing. Should we do that?
Well, I think the Trump administration has shown that they are wary, at least what we've seen in the last few days, of actually destroying energy facilities that could actually hurt not just the people of Iran and their ability to, the economy, totally and the economy of the regime, so to speak, but it could also affect the global oil market. And you see that the Trump administration has been very receptive and very concerned about the domestic political pressures back home about rising gas prices. So I think that was certainly an option that was floated, but there was also when Israel hit an energy facility about a week ago, and the U.S. apparently was supportive of it, but they quickly backtracked when it turned out to affect the oil market globally. So, I think there are a lot of sensitivities about the economy, and that's affecting the strategy here against Iran.
There is, but last word to you. At some point, if the objective is to get this regime collapsed, if they haven't collapsed after pages 1 through 14, don't we we can't leave them there. Do you agree with me about that? You cannot leave them in place.
Look, I at the very least, at least from the Israeli perspective, they want to wipe out the missile launchers, the ballistic missiles, and I think the next most important thing is getting rid of the nuclear material that may also require some special operation forces to do that. So there may need to be more assets or more military personnel in the region to handle some of the operational goals. But I think they've done a lot, and the question is what is the timeline going forward?
I hope they do a lot more. Josh Kroshauer, thank you. Follow him on X at Josh Kroshauer. Coming up, one of my favorite guests, Aviv Rettig-Gur of the Free Press. He's their Middle East correspondent from Israel, joins me. Talk about how the war is going. It's really been a 30-month war since 10/7, but there are two battles underway now, one over the skies of Iran, one in Lebanon. Let me talk to you about a battle a long time ago, one in 1775. It actually began in the legislature, St. John's Church in Richmond. Patrick Henry rose up on his feet to say, give me liberty or give me death. Not long thereafter, Lexington and Concord. Not long thereafter, the war was underway. Took us till the summer of 1776 to declare our independence. Right now, Americans for Prosperity, one of our great sponsors, created a terrific way to celebrate this historic year through their One Small Step initiative. That's all the stuff you need is at one website, A250toolkit.com/Hugh. The letter A, the number 250toolkit.com/Hugh. A250toolkit.com/Hugh. What's it intended to do? Make you an active and involved citizen. In this year, recommit, take one small step. Might be a school board meeting. Might be sitting on Parks and Recreation. Might be coaching the local community basketball team for kids who don't have the skill set that they otherwise will get from you. Do something to make America better this year. A250toolkit.com/Hugh. Take one small step. Let me remind you, I'm taking Relief Factor 3 times a day. I think I've got tendonitis, rotator cuff tendonitis. It's not getting any better. And it goes And when I do something like I did yesterday, having my friend Ralphie for a week is a little bit of a challenge. It's not really getting better. So I'm tripling down on Relief Factor, which is what I do whenever I hurt something bad. I carry in curcumin, resveratrol, omega. Just simple. Second time you've seen me do that today on the Salem News Channel. I'll do it again in hour number 3. Why? Because when something isn't working well and you got a minor ache, I mean, I'm not dying here. I'm able to do the show. I'm able to walk Ralphie. I'm able to go trundling, able to do whatever I do, except at night, it just throbs a little bit. Ice, heat, ice, heat. Yeah, time for Relief Factor. Up the dosage. If it doesn't work, then it's physical therapist time. So it's not magic, but it sure does work most of the time. Call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. Ask for the starter pack, $19.95. That's a 3-week supply, less than $1 a day. Or go to relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. And let me remind you, please, in our last 8 days, go over to the Food for the Poor banner at the top of hughhewitt.com. It says Give Living Water. Your gifts matter. $5, $25, $50 provides clean water for children for up to a year and 2 children. All you have to do is come up with $50. Best way to give is through that banner, Give Living Water. But you can also call 1-855-359-4673. 855-359-4673. You can also text my name, Hugh, H-U-G-H, to 51555. They'll send you a secure link. Or you can just call 855-359-4673. As promised, Haviv Rettig-Gur is back. He is the Middle East correspondent for the Free Press. He's also the host of Ask Haviv Anything. And if you ever join a Patreon community, this is the Patreon community to join. Haviv, thank you for joining with me today. I got a lot to talk to you about, but I'm sort of glad we missed a couple of times earlier this week because I got to hear the episode with Professor Schuften today, so that added to my list. Can you first tell people about the Patreon community and why they want to be a part of it?
Yeah, thanks, Hugh. I appreciate it very much. We have a podcast that's trying to teach this region, trying to teach the history of the region, of Israelis and Palestinians, of the big ideas that drive the Iranian regime, for example. It's not just a bunch of crazy people. They're big and profound and serious ideas, and they're generations old. And when you really understand that, you begin to be able to really understand policy better, why they respond the way they respond, why they can take catastrophic levels of damage and still hold out, right? That was an episode I did before the war began. The bombs are not gonna fell this regime. And if you understand why, you also begin to understand what will fell this regime, what kinds of narratives, what kinds of strategies will. So that's what it's about. And the Patreon community was just a way to keep the lights on. You know, it's a way to pay $5 a month and help us fund this thing. We're 5 salaries at this point. We try and have fact checkers and things like that. And it turned into a real community. There are forums there. People are discussing, people are sharing studies they pull from all over the internet. And I have learned a lot, and people ask questions that then guide our future episodes. So it's a new world, you know. I grew up in print journalism, and this is a whole new world, and it's kind of wonderful.
It is kind of wonderful, especially if you have a war going on and run up to a war. And Israel's been at war for 2.5 years. The United States has been at war for 1 day, and then now we're in day 26. Let me begin with the big, broad question. How do you assess the war that began on 10/7? How is that war going? That means all of it.
On 10/7, Israel went to war against an idea, not against a specific militia, even though that specific militia is absolutely our enemy. It wants to murder my children. It says so every day. You have to be a very particular kind of Western ideologue not to hear it when it's their fundamental idea. We certainly went to war with Hamas, but we looked around and we said, wait a second, how could Hamas want this war in Gaza? What is the meaning of these tunnels, the biggest tunnel system in the history of war? I mean, just the most comprehensive system that means that the only way to get to Hamas is to go through Palestinian cities, is to blow up entire regions in order to blow up what is by far, I mean, 5-fold the next biggest military tunnel system. It's the biggest thing Palestinians have ever built, and Hamas spent Gaza's entire economy for 15 years on building it. And so this is the war, this way that Gaza looks. This was what Hamas planned. This was what it would take to get Hamas out of those tunnels, and it wasn't enough to get Hamas out of those tunnels. And critique Israel all you want. I think it's really important to critique wars, and this was a war fought in an urban environment with civilian dead in the many thousands. So this is not. But my point is a strategic, tactical one. How would Hamas possibly plan, build a war in which the only possibility for the enemy coming for you after you commit a massacre like that, and announce many times since October 7th that you will commit it again and again and will never not commit it? So the enemy's going to come for you. And then you build this tunnel system. And then in 2.5 years of war, after building what is basically the most comprehensive bomb shelter system in the history of war, not letting a single Gazan child into it for 2.5 years? What is that? How do you understand these things? Assume that Hamas isn't stupid or crazy. Assume that it's normative, real, thoughtful human beings who live in a certain world and are responding to how they see the world. And it turns out that the idea driving Hamas is this particular idea. It's called in Arabic the mukawama. It translates into resistance in English, but that doesn't describe what the word means. What the word means in Arabic is something much, much bigger. It's a kind of mass martyrdom ideology in which Muslim thinkers over the last century and a half have tried to explain why Islam is so far behind the West. And one of the streams that come out of this conversation between theologians and political leaders has been this stream called the Muslim Brothers or the Salafists or the basically jihadi radicals, however you call them, is this stream that says we are very weak, but our weakness is a kind of purity. The Westerners are very powerful, but that makes them also arrogant. The weak and humble are closer to God by definition. And so God will intercede on our behalf. How do we get God to intercede on our behalf in the great civilizational war against the arrogant, powerful West? Martyrdom, sacrifice, mass martyrdom and sacrifice that demonstrates our faith, that brings God into history to intervene and allow us to defeat the great powers of the West. This is the animating idea behind the Iranian regime. Khomeini, the founder of this regime, talked about the mustadafin, the humble, defeating the mustakbirin, the powerful, the arrogant, and explicitly explained that martyrdom was the path that closes that gap between weak and powerful. It's a way of thinking about the world that instead of looking at the West as a kind of successful best practice, right? Democracies, it turns out, build better economies, stronger political systems, more stability. When you're switching out your leader every few years, you tend to be a more stable political system than when you're just a bunch of tyrants who inherit from each other. All of these best practices the West brought, instead of that being the secret to the West's power and success and scientific advancement, it's a way of saying, actually, none of that is true. We're all living through a kind of mystical religious situation, and if we just are willing to die enough and to have our people die enough, and that's how then we win, and that's how and the victory is a religious victory, and that's how you produce a Hamas that plans the destruction of Gaza as its foundational strategy and force multiplier. And we looked around the region after understanding that on October 8th, and we said, well, that's Hezbollah. Hezbollah is absolutely willing to have Lebanon destroyed in the Great War to defeat the arrogant Israeli power, Western power, which is how they frame it. And that's Iran. Iran talks about us as the little Satan and America as the big Satan. It's not that it hates America because America supports Israel. It hates Israel because it sees Israel as part of America. In other words, America is the thing it hates most and first and most profoundly. And if people want to understand why, you have to go to Ali Shariati. That's the name to Google, and you will discover a kind of Marxist theoretician who melded Shia eschatology with Marxist ideas in the 1960s and 70s and was Khomeini's great teacher on these issues. And so they see us as that, and they're coming for us, and they're undeterrable because they believe that martyrdom is strength. And if you have an enemy that is literally willing to burn their own society to the ground on the altar of the destruction of you because they believe God has decreed it, there's no deterrence. It's literally undeterrable, and there's no peace, and there's no compromise. You actually have to defeat this enemy. The Nazis actually
have to destroy it. Now, for 20 years, maybe 17, I've been telling people they need to read Lawrence Wright's The Looming Tower to understand Sunni extremism and Qutb and the Muslim Brotherhood. After you did episode 93, which is your 2.5-hour extravaganza on resistance theology on the Shia side, then you followed it up with episode 99, which is the 1-hour version. I went and found a book entitled Iran's Grand Strategy of Political History by Vali Nasser, who's at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies in Washington, D.C. And it's really good. And it's sort of a slower version for readers or listeners of what 93 and 99 do, but I was able to understand it. Are you familiar with that book?
I haven't read it. I know of its existence. I really ought to read it.
It makes the same points you do about maybe in a little less judgmental, a little more academic approach, but yours is more entertaining, and it made this a lot more understandable. When you have two enemies, Sunni fundamentalism, Wahhabist extremism, Al-Qaeda, and the Iranian regime, and they sometimes work together, and then you get a Zarqawi who will sometimes try and just go right after the Shia throat. There is no alternative except to destroy the Iranian regime. That's what John Fetterman said yesterday. Is there an alternative other than destroying the Iranian regime?
The idea has to die. It doesn't, if you can't literally destroy the regime because for 47 years, this regime has literally succeeded at nothing, built nothing, developed nothing, driven one of the wealthiest countries in the world naturally in terms of both human intelligence and in terms of hydrocarbon reserves, has driven its economy into the ground. So this is a regime that has done nothing but destroy every part of Iranian society that could possibly have built out any kind of power center to oppose the regime. There's simply no one organized in Iran, in Iranian society, the Iranians made sure of it, who could resist, who could organize against this regime. So maybe the regime can't fall. But we don't actually need the institutions to fall. What we need is the idea to die. The idea that says we must destroy Israel on the path to destroying America and all of the arrogant West in order for Islam to be redeemed. And along the way, it's okay if the entire Iranian people chokes to death on our tyranny and on our incompetence. That idea.
Haviva, right before you went to break, you said the idea has to die. I hope it does, but in the meantime, there's a two-front war going on. The latest battle, 10-7 led to a battle in Gaza. There was a battle in Lebanon with Hezbollah. Now there's a battle over the skies of Iran, and there's a battle in southern Lebanon. How do you assess those two battles? Just like World War II had many fronts and many battles. Some were terrible, Tarawa. Some were the Marianas Turkey shoot. Others were really risky, Normandy. We've got two right now, Israel in southern Lebanon and Israel and America, and maybe the UAE and maybe Saudi Arabia joining in over the skies of Iran. How do you assess both of those battles and their immediate objectives? Not against the idea, but against the regime's power.
If you understand this war as a war against an ideological front, it's going astonishingly well. If you want to pick apart every single individual battle, it's going fairly astonishingly well in military terms. I don't know about political terms. Israel is certainly hated among many parts of the world right now. Some of that is propaganda. Some of that is that there is this terrible war in Gaza, but there was a worse war going on in Sudan nobody talked about or saw. There's a lot of discourse, a lot of propaganda. The Israelis and the Palestinians and the Iranians are symbols to a whole lot of ideologues all over the world. Israel certainly has a huge problem in terms of its public persona, public image on the world stage. Militarily, it is a victory every step of the way. People will then argue you can't kill an idea. People will then argue Hezbollah is still there. People will argue the Iranian regime hasn't fallen yet. It can still burn things to the ground on its way out. Maybe that means it can never be felled because nobody's willing to literally remove 20% of the oil supply for 5 years. Yeah, you could argue that, sure, but that would assume that Israel is thinking in the way most Westerners think about this war, which is to say we have a pinpoint problem, we're going to attack it with a pinpoint solution, and if it isn't all finished and within 2 weeks and we're all home drinking our eggnog, then we've lost. That is not how the Israelis are thinking about it. The Israelis are thinking about this in Middle Eastern terms. The idea will come for us in one form or another, no matter what we do in any one arena. So it has to be all the arenas, and the idea itself has to die. On October 8th, I went on a podcast and I was asked this question, what happens now? And one of my main arguments was, this is not going to be about Gaza. This is going to be the beginning of a war that must go to Hezbollah and a war that must go to Iran, and it might take 5 years. And I got some emails of people telling me, you're silly. Not even you're a warmonger. That's a silly thing to say. Israel's not going to challenge Iran. Israel's not going to take on the costs the 200,000 missiles and rockets hitting Tel Aviv that would be involved in attacking Hezbollah. And here we are 2.5 years later, and actually it is exactly what has happened. And so Israel is vastly more powerful than it was 2.5 years ago. Its enemies are vastly weaker than they were 2.5 years ago. And that has to continue, and it may have to continue for years more until the idea no longer makes any sense. And Hugh, I'm sorry to go on like this. Can I just one last point about this?
Please,
it's happened before. Our experience of this has happened before. In the 1950s and 60s, Israel, tiny little third world Israel that began its life rationing egg powder to children because they didn't have enough food to feed the children. Tiny, poor, impoverished Israel under a British and American arms embargo faced Arab armies united behind this charismatic Nasser with brand new Soviet hardware coming at them to demolish and annihilate them. And this idea of pan-Arabism that Nasser was selling, that unified Egypt and Syria briefly, that brought the Jordanians in and the Iraqis all to attack us all at once, again and again and again. This idea was basically the argument that if the Arabs lost in 48 because they were disunited, if they unite and remember their strength and remember their unity, the Jews stand no chance. How did that pan-Arabist idea die? We destroyed it in tank battles in the desert. So we've already been through this cycle, and we have to go through it again. And by the way, if we can't kill this mukawama idea, this terrorism, self-sacrificial mass martyrdom terrorism idea, it already doesn't stop in the Middle East. It's going to be exported everywhere because it works. It had better not work, and we're going to make sure it doesn't work.
Now, you already named the price, although I think you priced it too high. You said the world has to get along without 20% of its oil supply for 5 years. In fact, substitutionary effects will take place. People will find alternative forms of energy. Saudi's already opened up their pipeline that they haven't used for years. You can build a pipeline from Saudi Arabia through Israel to the Mediterranean. You can get the oil. It takes a year and a half to get the oil. And in the meantime, I think the world will produce more. America can produce more. And some costs will go up. I think it's worth it, whatever it takes. And I think Trump might think it's worth it. Do you think do you think UAE and Saudi Arabia have come around to the fact we cannot live across the strait from this fanatical, medieval, theological, crazy regime?
Before, from 2015 to 2024, Iran took out something like 20 tankers in the Persian Gulf. And in the tanker war, in the Iran-Iraq war, there were 4 years where hundreds of tankers in the Persian Gulf were hit by this regime. This idea that every time it's in danger, it shoots up the global oil supply. You want to live under that shadow? I'll say more than that. The energy prices can be spiked at Iran's will because it can start blowing things up. That is its one strategy. It, by the way, has no other strategy. It has no air force that can fly. It has no navy that can sail. All it has is the ability to blow up somebody else's tankers, a more productive society and government's tankers. That's not any bad word against Persians. The Persian people are amazing. This regime can only destroy and only ever has. But I'll say another thing. Iran sits on something like the third largest hydrocarbon reserve in the world. We keep talking about, well, what will happen to the cost of energy if Iran blows up tankers in the Strait of Hormuz? Why don't we have this conversation about what happens to the cost of energy if the Iranian oil and the Iranian gas enters the global market, actually doesn't have sanctions on it, isn't the plaything of grand empires? They're not trying to constantly demolish entire nations in the Middle East, but this unbelievably vast oil reserve comes onto the market naturally and builds up Iran and makes everybody's oil much cheaper. On the other side of this regime lies a much, much lower price of oil for everybody. That's also part of this conversation. We can only see the bad side. There's also a good side, and it's massive. So, you want to live in the shadow of a bully trying to get a nuke that has already done this again and again and again? Go for it. I think that I can't afford to. It's told me this won't end until I'm dead. So here I am responding to somebody who told me I have nothing to lose. I submit that the world has vastly more to gain from this regime falling than they have to lose from this regime being in its death throes.
After they fired whatever they had at Diego Garcia, everybody in Western Europe should have figured that out. When we come back, I'm going to ask again the follow-up. Does the Gulf get it? And in fact, if the Gulf gets it, can the coalition do what has to be done? Because the Iranian people are done with this too. They had 35,000 of them murdered in January. And I have to think they're done with this too. So the idea might already be dead, but a zombie regime is a zombie regime. We're in week 4 of the war, Haviv, that is the war with Iran that Americans counted. We're in actually the 30th month of the war, which began on 10/7. Do you think the world will wake up and do what has to be done? And by the way, I, Hugh Hewitt, not anybody else, nobody's told me this, think you have to destroy the oil infrastructure of Iran. You have to impoverish the nation and impoverish the IRGC, because they just keep pulling old IRGC guys out of retirement to put them in charge of a regime when Israel and the United States kills them. They've probably got a limited supply somewhere, but not for a long time, or they're going to run out of hardliners who fought in the Iraq-Iran war for 10 years, 35 years ago. They got a lot of those crazy people. So do you think the world's ready to do what has to be done, which is to blow up their ability to sustain their regime?
I mean, the Europeans absolutely not. Europe has willfully made itself completely dependent on Russian energy and on Persian Gulf energy, something that is not true of the United States. And Europe has disarmed itself of militaries and the ability to project power, and Europe is now at the mercy of everyone else, of the whims of various Middle Eastern powers and the United States and everybody else. And so they're really very nervous and very angry and very upset. And we're hearing interesting things from the Italian leadership, from the German leadership, and from the Japanese leadership. Ironically, 80 years ago, the Axis powers, and they get the great danger represented by the ideology that Iran leads and isn't the sole purveyor of, but nevertheless leads in the Middle East. And they don't want this war to end with the regime intact. They might not have anything to contribute in terms of toppling it, but they certainly are on the side of the Gulf states. They're on the side of Israel in this war, even if some of them, like the Italians, don't say so. Ironically, it is the allies of Europe, the French, the British, who are utterly unwilling to see the actual challenge posed by these ideas and the destructiveness of them to Iran and to the region and to the oil infrastructure of the world and all of that. So I think the world understands. I'll put it really simple. If this regime survives this round of war, that is okay. That is okay. I was asked in the 12-day war in June this exact same question. You bombed them for 12 days, you killed a bunch of generals, and here they are still ticking. Yeah, this is a long war. This is not the kind of war that is exactly catered to the schedule of your TikTok feed. Like, this is a long, serious confrontation between deep ideas and ways of life and ways of thinking about the world. And it will be decided in time. It will be decided in investment, in will, in a test of wills, and in sticking power. And that remains true. So we brought down this regime a few very large pegs, and the world might, because of the energy prices, pull back. The United States might pull back. I don't ask Trump to lose the midterms for me. I don't think he's doing it for me. I think there are but not living under the shadow of Iran's veto of shipping in the Strait of Hormuz is reason enough to not have this regime rule for another 25 years in that region. But nevertheless, he has given me this great gift. It's a great gift to me, even if it wasn't specifically meant for me. And I don't have the right to ask for more, but we will have another war. There's no other choice. Iran will not stop fighting, will not stop demolishing nations, will not stop expanding.
Now, yesterday, Israel called up 400,000 reservists, if I read my Israeli English language press correctly. What's that mean, Habib? That's the whole shebang. That's everybody who can get called up, basically.
It's flexibility for the army. It's flexibility for the army. For Lebanon, for a longer-term fight with Iran, it is Israel signaling a willingness to keep going at a very strong level and to escalate. One of the things that Professor Shiftan talks about is this idea of escalation dominance. You face an enemy, and the enemy wants to escalate until you bow out, and you want to escalate until they bow out. Well, whoever can escalate farthest wins. And so the ability to project the willingness to escalate is very much part of this war. That's my sense of it. 400,000 people were not called up. The army was given permission by the political echelon to begin to do that in terms of logistics, which is mostly a signal.
Okay, do you think it signals that the Lebanon south of the Litani is going to be occupied on a more or less permanent basis? 30 seconds to the break.
What we have heard from Israeli officials, it's a big question of how much of it is rhetoric and how much of it is actual policy. What we've heard from Israeli officials is we have to root out Hezbollah. Hezbollah remains a threat. We will root it out until it is dead. We can do this forever. They claim they can. We can too. And we will hold south of the Litani until we have defeated them. Instead of Hezbollah saying that about Israel, back when Israel occupied southern Lebanon for 18 years, like America's Afghanistan experience, and then Israel left, now it's the opposite. Hezbollah will never not fight a war against us. We will hold that territory and hurt them until they are the ones who leave.
I want to thank Aviv Redigur for a lot of time. I have a column coming out tomorrow. We have an ally in Israel that is really unique. We've never operated with an ally, even in World War II, at this level of interoperability and command and control. So it's really an extraordinary point in military history. And not many Americans know much about what the Israelis think of their point of view. And I list a few people in my Fox News column tomorrow, including Aviv, about whom Americans ought to be aware and follow so they know what our ally is doing. Now, our allies' politics matter a lot. The khaki election, Haviv, I don't know if you remember in 1900, the English thought they'd won the Second Boer War. They hadn't, but they thought they'd won. So I think Lord Salisbury called a snap election, won more than 400 seats. The poor Liberal Party got smashed. They were below 200 seats because they have a really quick election in England, and you can do that when you think you've won a war. Can Bibi do that? I asked Nadav Ayali this yesterday. He said, oh, no, it's going to be in October. What do you think?
We're going to find out very soon. It depends on a very few people, and I don't like to predict what a very few people will do. It's easy to predict what 100 million people will do. It's hard to predict what 3 people will do. The Knesset has to pass a budget by the end of the month, and they might pass an extension and give themselves a couple more weeks or something like that. But if they don't complete the budget process properly and all the different things, then the Knesset is legally required to dissolve itself to snap elections, which happen 90 days later. So that would be July. If they do pass that budget, then the elections will be at their regularly scheduled time in October. What's fascinating about that is that this would be one of the more hated governments or more divisive governments in the history of Israel, which is, by the way, not unexpected after October 7, and it's also a much more polarized time than it was in many periods in Israel's past. So I'm not even accusing them of being somehow beyond the pale, although in some of the things they're doing, I'm extremely troubled. But it would be, even though it's one of the least liked governments, and even though it hasn't actually won in any poll that I know of since it was voted in December 2022, it will be the first Israeli government in history to last its full term if they manage to pass a state budget now. Where can they pass a state budget?
Huh.
I think so. I think so because the ultra-Orthodox are getting a lot of what they want, mainly a ton of money. The religious Zionist factions of the government are getting a lot of what they want, again, mainly a ton of money. And everyone is getting enough that, they're going to stick with it. As we get closer to election day, by the way, the various different right-wing factions are all going to need to try to cannibalize each other's voters because they have some overlapping constituencies. And that's a lot of the times leading up to Israeli elections. And this is true of many parliamentary systems where parties that are together in a coalition, share many ideas, tend to then produce all kinds of artificial crises to have something to distinguish themselves to their bases as they enter the election season. So it's not a big question whether the election is in July or August or October, but those are the kinds of structural things that we have to watch for to know.
All right, so last question, and you've got 3 or 4 minutes on this one, so take your time. Netanyahu has done a brilliant job in waging this long war. He got caught off by surprise, and he was wrong about Hamas, but he's done a great job waging this war, and he's got President Trump working with him, waging this war. And finally, we've come to grips with Iran over the skies of Iran. Finally. I'm 70 years old. I've been waiting for this for a long time. I saw Iran fall into chaos on the couch with Richard Nixon and San Clemente as a writing member of staff in 1978, 79, and 80. So I remember it very well. Do you think that matters to the average Israeli, or are they just as likely to do what the English did in 1945 and throw Churchill out after he was the only man who could have beaten the Nazis and did? And nevertheless, they threw him out because they were the English and they were tired of him.
I have to tell you, a lot of Israelis who really appreciate Netanyahu on the war think that he has hurt them, betrayed them, and led them in bad directions on a host of domestic issues that have no salience or resonance or really are understood outside of Israel for obvious reasons. How much does anyone else around the world understand America's healthcare debate, right?
Right.
But elections
Right.
can be about health and unemployment and not about the big thing that the world cares about, like the Iraq War 25 years ago or whatever. So the answer, as far as the polls tell us, is Netanyahu does not, his current coalition does not at this moment have a majority. It does not have a parliamentary victory. And it hasn't in any poll. Now, somebody will find me one poll by some right-wing pollster, I'll take that back. I'm not saying there literally isn't one, but I follow the polls very closely, and certainly none of the mainstream ones over time. Does that mean that the opposition has a victory? We don't see a clear path. We're talking about an election between, 16 parties, of which 11 will make it in, roughly, give or take. That's how it works. So it's always a kind of chaos math to try and figure out that path. But a lot of Israelis, they will say things like Netanyahu pulled the trigger on Iran. That was terrifying. That was scary. That took guts. We didn't know that Iran would not respond competently. If it had responded much more competently,
You didn't.
didn't.
You didn't know that.
There could have been 2,000 ballistic missiles on Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv could have been on fire. And he knew the potential cost. He also knows the cost of letting Iran continue to develop, letting this regime produce the capabilities it wants to produce. The Chinese were literally, they signed an agreement a month before the war to hand Iran its first supersonic missiles. You know what that would have done to the Strait of Hormuz? An American aircraft carrier could have been taken easily by an Iranian gunboat. I mean, we're talking about an upgrading of their capabilities that we have stopped. And so Netanyahu pulled the trigger and made that absolutely terrifying decision. On every domestic policy issue that I care about, that my kids' lives depend on this massive welfare state over in the ultra-Orthodox community that is larger, they get more per capita, and they get incentivized not to work in a vast scale. Something like 50% of their men don't work at all. And the ones who do work tend to be low earners because their education system is a separate education system that doesn't teach math and English after fourth grade. Now, Israel is not a hydrocarbon power. Yeah, it has some natural gas reserves right now, but not compared to Middle Eastern levels, and that's very recent. All we have built with human talent. We have built with the simple fact that Israel invests more in R&D than any other nation on earth per capita. It is the number one on earth. That is what we are. That is our strength. That is our power. Now, I'm a big fan of religious education. I'm the son of a rabbi. I have podcast episodes about holidays and diving into the Jewish religious bookshelf. I'm a huge fan of religion. Oh, ditto Christianity. I'm a big fan. You've got to work. That doesn't mean you get to not work and move into religion. Netanyahu's expanded that. There was a law passed this week by this Knesset, when everybody else is hunkering down in bomb shelters, when people are losing jobs because businesses are closed. This Knesset passed a law that expands the powers of the rabbinical courts, in which women don't...
I get it. Yeah, good on the war, bad on everything else. Haviv Redig Gur, I will check back with you in a few weeks. I have greatly appreciate your time today. Very illuminating as always. Episode 93 and 99, friends of Ask Haviv Anything. Hope you like that Haviv Redig Gur interview. It'll be posted over at my YouTube channel. I'm trying to bring you the point of view of our Israeli allies as often as I can. I write about it tomorrow on Fox News. Don't miss that. I've been talking to you about food for the poor all month long. Please give a listen to one of my favorite callers ever about generosity towards food for the poor, Sarah.
I just wanted to say I really admire your work with Food for the Poor each year. And I'm 16 years old. I live at home, so I don't really make a whole lot of money. But I have an envelope that I keep on my nightstand, and each time I do get some money, I put a little bit away throughout the year, maybe like $1 or $2, and it's for Food for the Poor. And so this year I saved up $80 to give, and I'm not saying any of this to brag. I just wanted to encourage your listeners who probably make more money than I do. And so if you can just
make more money than you do, Sarah. Sarah's probably 20 now and probably still giving to Food for the Poor. Sarah, you ought to send me a note, let me know. All you have to do is go to hughhewitt.com and find the banner at the top of the website. It says Give Living Water, make your contribution. Doesn't have to be overwhelming, though. We would welcome a big one like Larry Elder got. We would welcome the $50. We welcome the $5. Go to hughhewitt.com or call 855 359-4673. Also want to remind you two more things. Consumer Cellular is my sponsor. Don't throw money away. If you just took the money you saved from Consumer Cellular and gave it to Food for the Poor each year, it would be hundreds of dollars. Consumer Cellular will really save you money, but you got to call to find out how much. 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. ConsumerCellular.com/Hugh. My code is Hugh. That gets you the second month for free, whatever plan you sign up for. But if you're 50 years and older, you want to ask them about the unlimited data plan. A lot of super seniors worried about data. They don't really understand it. They're just going to take the unlimited data. The only place you want to go, if that's you, if I just named you, you don't really understand data and you don't know what, you just want to know what the price is and it's not going to get higher and you're not going to get hammered by a super bill, then go to 1-800-411-4454. Remember to use my name, Hugh, and tell them you want the 50 and older, 2 lines for $60 a month, and you will be in great shape. ConsumerCellular.com/Hugh. Finally, I'm taking my last relief factor. I think I have rotator cuff tendonitis. Talking to the PT today. Not getting a lot better, but I'm taking relief factor every hour. Why? Because tendonitis is just swelling. It's just inflammation. To make inflammation go away, Relief Factor has got the 4 natural ingredients, Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, omega, that help your body's natural inflammatory system, along with ice and heat. Once in a while, you run into a stubborn ache or pain. I've got one. Doesn't stop me from walking Ralphie. Doesn't stop me from getting out there and doing everything I want to do. But if you want to try Relief Factor and see if it works on what bothers you, call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF. Or go to relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. The starter pack is $19.95 either when you call or when you visit the website. Less than $1 a day at relieffactor.com.